Good morning again. When was the last time you read Isaiah? Last Christmas. There's some honesty in the house, yes. Me too. It was a joy to have a look at this again and just let the words just sort of sink in with a little bit of reflection. Thank you for your interest in the family and for your prayers, your support, for believing in us. Thank you. It means a lot. It's not easy reaching out to international people in an area such as this, but praise God, we've got the English language, which seems to be in demand, and it's a great way of connecting with people and just sharing a little bit about the hope that we have in natural ways and helping people along with life, giving them tools as such as, how to get a bus from Oldham to Piccadilly and make yourself understood and pay the right fare at the same time. Little things like that can really help people along the way. So I wanted to show you a word cloud. I'm an English teacher, so you'll have to bear with me here. I put Isaiah 9, 2-7 into something called a word cloud. And what it does for you is it magnifies the words that are repeated more often. So lots of words in the passage this morning. It's not the sort of passage I'd give to one of my students because it's got lots of difficult words, long words, and there are words like plunder and yoke and zeal, and you need a dictionary for some of those, don't you? And then there's a difficult subject, difficult theme of war and of fighting, and that's quite difficult to read. And there's also some strange language in the passage that we read today. We read about a child, a son, that's given, who is also an everlasting father. So that's a little bit mysterious, isn't it? A son who is also a father. Interesting. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But the word, right through all these different sort of words and themes, is rejoice. It's church. You can shout in church. It's all right. Very respectful. Rejoice. Rejoice. Right in the middle of it all. Yeah? And I wonder some other words, because I English teacher, what does that word rejoice mean? It's not really a word we use every day. To be glad. To be glad. To be of good cheer. To celebrate. To jump for joy. When was the last time you jumped for joy? We're British, aren't we? Inwardly, jump for joy. Yeah. Does anyone feel a bit gloomy this morning? A bit downbeat? Good? No, definitely not. A bit pessimistic? Things are looking a little bit bleak? Yeah, I feel a little bit like that this morning. The drizzle's coming down very fine. The crisp days are behind us. We're back to the drizzle. And it's easy to feel a bit gloomy, isn't it? And that is the context of the passage that we've just read. The person who wrote this was speaking into a situation of political uncertainty. We don't know much about that, do we? Political uncertainty. Yeah? Yeah? There's an invasion going on. There is a foreign army at the gates. People are losing everything, and perhaps even their lives. That's the situation that this person is speaking into. And in that darkness, in that gloomy despair, the people suddenly see a great light. I wonder how many of us this morning would be encouraged by a great light in their lives. Light has dawned. And in one version, let's see what, yes, it's up, it's the right slide. Light, sunbursts of light. How many of you would like that this morning? Light, sunbursts of light in your life. I certainly need some of that. And with that light, with that great light, we read about war coming to an end, fighting stopping, and the people are glad. There's going to be a festival. There's joy, celebration. And one version of the Bible says this, and this just stuck with me: sharing rich gifts and warm greetings. Sharing rich gifts and warm greetings. Oh, wonderful, wonderful image. Yeah. But there's another reason. This light is going to come, war's going to stop. And in verse 6 and verse 7, we read about a son. We read about a son that is given for us. Now, some people could say, well, the author's repeating a little bit. There's a son, there's a child, given. And it's a gift for us. And, some people will say, well, this is an ancient text written for somebody else other than us. It's not really for us. It's talking about the king of that time, and people sort of spoke nice words over that king, but like, long live the king, sort of wishful thinking almost. But, you read a little bit more, and that's just nonsense, isn't it? Because verse 6, he's going to be a wonderful counselor. He's going to be a wonderful counselor. Mighty God, moving away a little bit from human kings here, mighty God, everlasting Father, and a Prince of Peace. Well, for me, that's not really a human king at all, is it? And, yes, help is going to come for this country being attacked. These words that are being spoken to. But these words are for us. They're for every single person on this planet. This child, this son, is Jesus. Fully God, fully man, God with us, God in us, to be with us as we make sense of this world and the people around us. Yes, life is gloomy at times, It's hard. But we have this great light of Jesus in our lives. And I'm reminding myself, as much as saying this to you, we have the light of Jesus. And we get to experience gladness, don't we? With him in our lives. So what about this sentence about the government being on his shoulders? What an odd way of putting it. If you had to write down that sentence, in as much as a poetical form as possible, you'd come up with this: the government on his shoulders. What's all that about? Well, ultimately, Jesus is going to return, and he's going to rule the heavens and the earth. But obviously not yet. But we can still see the government of Jesus if we just stop to think about it a little bit more. And I've got some ideas for you, and you've probably got your own ideas, but I'm just going to go through some of these and see if any of these resonate with you. Where are we up to in the slides? Oh, yes, good. We're up to the right place, thank you. Thinking about the leaders of this world, generally speaking, we do have some good leaders. I'm just talking generally here. Leaders in this world tend to look for what they can get from you or from us. But Jesus looks for what he can do for you. Just going to let those words sink in. You think about the leaders in our world today. They're looking to get something from us. But Jesus is looking to see what he can do for us. Next slide, please. Leaders, generally speaking, surround themselves with servants. Yes, people who will do their bidding. But Jesus surrounds us with his servanthood. He's gentle. He's full of humility. He wants to serve. Next one, please. Leaders use their power to build their own little empires and their own sort of little power structures. Wouldn't you say so? Generally speaking. But Jesus uses his power to wash our feet and to make us clean and whole. Next slide, please. I'm going to test you on this afterwards, so I hope you... Well, some of you sat up a little bit there. Not really, just teasing. Leaders trade their influence for money, and we see that all around, don't we? Absolute obsession and addiction to money in the world around us. And they're looking to trade and exchange their influence for cold, hard cash. Well, what does Jesus do? God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, Jesus. Next slide, please. Oh, what about this? It's getting a little bit close to the bone, some of these, aren't they? Leaders need regular conflict, friction, arguments, and wars to keep their own weapons and skills up to date and to assure their own advancement and to keep them in power. But what does Jesus do? Jesus brings wholeness, peace, satisfaction, healing, rest. Let's see what the next slide says. Oh yeah, I was thinking about this. The higher up leaders go in the authority structure, generally speaking, the more inaccessible they are. Have you ever tried to get hold of a leader? What did you do? Was it an answer phone, email? Did you get a reply? You haven't done it, have you? Well, just trying to get in touch with the council, for example. Get something done. Yeah? It's quite a struggle, isn't it? You've got to sort of battle through and fill in forms, and you might eventually get a reply and something done about it. But that leader that you need to speak to, the more important they are, generally more inaccessible. But consider Jesus. God with us. God alongside us, Emmanuel. God in us. And I remind myself about that when life's hard. God with us. God with us. Not somewhere out in the, in the solar system somewhere. Right here with me. Let's have a look at the next one. Oh, this one's true, isn't it? Leaders are desperate, absolutely desperate to be seen and heard. That's why people do daft things on social media. They've run out of ideas, haven't they? Desperate to be seen and heard. Well, consider Jesus. He's quiet, gentle. He's got sort of a background role. He's not up front, but he's faithful. And he gets on with things so they can be as useful as possible. Let's have a look at the next one. Oh, we've run ahead of ourselves. Let's go back a bit, Steve, just to the last one. You can probably think of some other ideas that contrast the leaders that we see around us with Jesus. with Jesus. The government is on his shoulders. If we stop and think about it, the government of Jesus is such an amazing thing. Let me give you some examples. When we see somebody, and I think some of us have got stories that we could share. If we see somebody who's miraculously left a life of anxiety, a life of dissatisfaction, a life of addiction, a life where they don't even see themselves as worthy, sort of a self-loathing, and you can see their lives transformed, you know that they are now led by Jesus. Whenever we see loving Christians getting up early, giving, working hard, persevering, quietly caring, forgiving those who are unseen and dismissed by society, and they have no expectation of a thank you. They're not in it for praise. If you went up to those people and said, "Oh, that's great what you do," they'd almost fall over with astonishment. When we think of those sorts of people, we know that they're governed by Jesus. When we see Christians full of peace, stillness, satisfaction, gladness and joy, when they speak of Jesus, we know who they're guided by. Whenever we see people give up work opportunities and educational opportunities and the promise of financial reward and future security and the nearness of loved ones, so that they can place themselves in situations where they can better share Jesus, you know where their motivations lie. It's a different sort of life. When we see our church leaders carefully, thoughtfully, lovingly lead us and walk along beside us, we know that they receive leadership skills and resources, tools and insight from the great King. So, I just want to encourage us this morning, the government of Jesus is alive. It's alive and it's working. It's often unsung. It's not often praised. Occasionally we hear about it in the media, Christians, good, occasionally. Yeah. But it's in the background. It's persevering, it's steadfast, it's unwavering, it's faithful, it's loving, and it has such a deep impact. I want us, as we just finish, to reflect upon those names that are given to the child, to the son. Can you remember some of them in verse 6? Can you remember some of those names that this son, this child is going to be called? Yeah. Come on, Kim, it's church. You can shout out. Shout out. Wonderful Counselor. Very good. 3 to go. Prince of Peace, I heard. Yeah, Prince of Peace. Any others? Thank you. Mighty God. Was there another one? Everlasting Father. And I got a slightly different version of those names from a different version of the Bible. But Amazing Counselor. Amazing Counselor. Strong God. Eternal Father and Prince of Wholeness. Just in your heart, why not just say these names? Why not just say these names right now as a sort of prayer? Wonderful, wonderful, isn't he? Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. Well, what do you think about this government of Jesus? What do you reckon? Come. You. Amen. Got one vote over there. It's great, isn't it? And the wonderful thing about this government of Jesus is there are no borders. You don't need an ID card. You can leave the passport at home. Jesus says, come on in. Come on in.